Hi there, everybody. I'm Lucas Martell. I'm the creator of Walkabout Mini Golf. And here we are on the first hole of the hard version of Arizona Modern. So let's do another tour. I'll just walk you through the course and the design behind it. My wife is from Tucson and spent a lot of time visiting family there and right near the Saguaro National Forest. There was definitely some inspiration there of just going on hikes through the cactus forest and really wanting to do something that kind of harkened back to that just this very zen, peaceful, chill, beautiful place to be. The night mode in particular is one of my favorites. I realized kind of early on that needed something that would sort of be a little different than what we had done on previous courses. And so came up with this idea of a lot of the architecture, especially in Arizona, is sort of ultra modern. You get a lot of these bare stones, poured concrete, stucco, even like the metal railings is something that I've seen a lot in, especially if you go to like any of the national parks or caves in that region. A lot of the architecture just sort of has this vibe to it. And there was something really cool to me about, I'm an architecture nerd, of just sort of taking this very natural place and combining that with an architectural element. Just something about it seemed to click for me, and it feels still very natural to the space. But it also, from a gameplay standpoint, is probably one of the most unique courses that's sort of traditional mini golf, just because having all of these perfectly round borders and few to no straight lines really changes how you play stuff, because it encourages you to roll along the outside of stuff, and bank shots are almost impossible on this course because of the slight variation of an angle of how things work. Another example I've talked about in the past, how much different you can make, even if you took the same concept but just put it with different shape language, how it could completely change how a hole plays. It's a little less up and down as Seagull Stacks was, but it definitely has a bit of this sort of like upward momentum. You still want to get that point where you're sort of like looking down over everything, and both for performance reasons and a variety of different things, there's not many points on this course that you can actually see the entire course at a given time. When you're hiking in the Saguaro National Forest, there's a lot of times that you're sort of hugging these rocks as you're going up and ascending, and you're constantly finding new pathways through areas that it's very closed off, and it's sort of like hiking up ravines almost. It's hard for me to say exactly what it is about architecture stuff that's always captured me. I like it. I'm one of the few people, I know a few architects. I have zero desire to be an architect, because this is sort of like the fun version where you don't have to worry about building codes and materials and cost of materials and how you're going to get to the site and everything. You just kind of get to construct these things, and then they exist. A couple of the architects who I know are kind of super jealous about that, and we love geeking out about things. But yeah, I don't know exactly where that passion for architecture started, but it's always been something that I like to think about. And if you look at just about any of the courses, some of them have an architectural component to them. Some of them, maybe it's a little bit less so, but even on ones that has a distinct, that is more about something else, we usually are looking for architectural influences. In this case, sort of like modern, mid-century modern, Googie, brutalist. There's just so many different sort of styles that really give a course a unique feel. And I think that's also something about this game that, like, I think, not to sort of like speak ill of other mini golf games, but I think that it's something that not a lot of other folks necessarily would have thought, like, oh, you really need to think about what architectural style of this mini golf course is. It's not something that people think about. But to me, it really does give something a sense of place, and it really does sort of create a lot of fantastic just views, and it just feels like, oh, that this is a place that I want to hang out in. And we've got some courses that are a bit more goofy and silly and fun, and even those, like even Sweetopia is a great example. Like, there is still a distinct kind of architectural style that we went, and figuring that out and locking it down early on, just like the shape language of the holes, is what really helps a place hang together and gives you a lot of inspiration of where ideas can come from, because it kind of limits you in a good way that sort of encourages you to come up with new ideas. We are coming up to hole 8, which is one of the iconic holes of this. The other big inspiration, and you see it much more on the back nine, although there was even a couple on the front nine, in Tucson and just in that part of the country, one of the things that I always see a lot of are skate parks. And so one of the big inspirations for this course was also just that idea of skate parks. This is the very first course that uses these sort of like U-shaped half pipes, quarter pipes. We've got bowls all over the place. Some people pick up on that, some people don't, but it really does create this very different style of gameplay that's about, oh yeah, you've got to ramp it up and skip over to this other section. All of our courses, even the ones like this that you think like, oh, okay, Arizona, and it's got the architectural element, but a lot of times, even though if it's not explicit, there's usually a couple of other things that we're thinking about in the design process to help give some inspiration to what we want a course to feel like in terms of the gameplay. This was of the 4 early courses, or the 4 courses that launched with the original version of the game. This was the one that was like night mode was sort of like, okay, yes, now we have to do night mode for every single course just because of how much I loved how the night mode changed it. And I believe this was also the very first course, although maybe we did it I guess we also did it in Cherry Blossom, but this really showed it off. But just that the look of the greens when you've got all of that built-in sort of step lighting. It's just this circle, but I don't know, to me, it just gives it this very nice vibe like you get in high-end hotels or something. Most people aren't going to be putting, built-in step lighting into their own homes. Like I was mentioning, hole 9, you do get this great look out, and especially looking at hole 18, you see shooting out over the canyon there. That was kind of loosely inspired by the Grand Canyon. They've got a walkway that goes out over the middle of nowhere. And if you look underneath, you can actually see the supporting structure. Layout is the name of the game for so many of these courses with us. And yeah, getting to that point where you have a vista looking out at where you're going and seeing like, that's where I want to go. I want to stand on that. And even though we want to make hole 18 one of the most interesting from a gameplay perspective, there's also an element that we're always balancing that just sort of like that sense of arrival that I want to stand on that spot. There's just something very human about looking at the mountain or looking at that promontory and being like, I want to stand there. It really helps with that walkabout aspect of this game of just, yeah, I want to be traveling through a space as much a part of it as the actual mini golfing sometimes. So when this course was built, this would have been before the launch of the original game. I had a feeling, I knew that it was like, wow, there's so much more that we could do with this and so many more places that we could go. I wasn't thinking about DLC and all of those courses explicitly, but it was always kind of in the back of my mind because I was having such a fun time designing these that I was like, man, I would love to keep doing this. And so even when the first version of the game launched with these 4 courses, kind of had every intention, like if it goes at all well, we were going to be adding a couple more courses. And Original Gothic was the next one that came after this one. But that was all made after the actual launch of the game when we saw that, okay, enough people are playing it that we're not just sort of like shouting into a void here. It's worth taking some time to do another course. So it probably took a little while just to see how the game was picked up. And also at the time of launch for this game, it was just the Quest 1. The Quest 2 actually came out a couple of weeks after this course launched. So even at the time, we still, there just weren't that many headsets out there. It was getting some great reception. This game was kind of perfect that it was done in the way that it was, that I was a solo developer for the most part. I had a little bit of help here and there, but these first 4 courses were mostly just me working stuff out and playing with friends and family to test them. But happening when it did, that was perfect because at the time it just wouldn't have been possible to do like the scope of what we have now. It would have been super, super risky, and I don't think that the audience was there yet. Whereas now that it's had a couple of years to build and grow, and we're adding so many new features and so many new courses, now it's like, okay, we can look back at this and like, there's some things that I love about these earlier courses. Whenever I come back to the original 4 courses, it's always the simplicity that kind of catches my eye of just how it's pure mini golf. You can tell that there's some thought and some care. They hold up. A lot of the courses that we've done later just have more stuff. They're bigger, they're bolder. The thing I would say more about a lot of the later DLCs and the newer courses that we've been doing is because of the team, we're just able to take bigger swings. We're able to have even more fun with it or do some off-the-wall things that if it were me as a solo developer, I never would have even attempted because it simply would have been impossible. And you can really see that when you look at some of the newest courses that have come out. As we're recording this, Mist was the last course that we launched. There is no way that that could have been done without the team that we have now, both from the design, all of the moving objects, the complexity of doing multiplayer puzzle solving, essentially, because each hole kind of becomes a puzzle where it has to reset between everyone, and the lighting, the shaders, just everything that's gone into this. I still think that the original courses do a great job of holding up. But yeah, there's just something about the newer courses that are really, really over the top and spectacular that I love about them. Looking at this as sort of the last course of the base game before we started doing add-ons, we did end up doing 4 more additional free courses. So Original Gothic, Tethys Station, Bogey's Bonanza, and Coyote Valley are all part of the base game now. So essentially we doubled the amount of content that originally shipped with the game. Before we started doing the DLCs, it's still a business. We still have to pay everybody, and we've got a much larger team. We're at about 25 right now. But at the same time, we also are just loving what we're doing, and we want to be able to keep doing it for as long as possible. So we're always trying to strike that balance between making sure that we can keep food on the table and keep everybody fed and keep everything healthy. But we also want as many people to play stuff as possible. So, you know, everything from pricing to how often we're releasing, a lot of it is about sort of like the health of the game, because we really do feel like we could quite happily keep making more mini golf courses and adding on to the base game experience for years to come. Now it's all about thinking ahead, and I can say that we've already got gameplay for all but I think 1 of the courses, maybe 2 of the courses that are going to release this year. And we're starting on layouts for stuff that's going to be releasing in 2024. So one of the things that we're doing internally is that we're really sort of spreading out that pipeline. And we've got, pretty much 10 or 11 courses being developed at any given time, which just makes it so much easier to work with everybody being remote. We're increasing the price of the DLCs. They were $2.99, now they're going to be $3.99. That kind of became evident that we needed to do that because we were finding that we were having to either cut features or cut time out of the development for each course just because we were trying to squeeze it into that same price point. And as these courses are getting just bigger and better, it takes more animators, more artists, more tech time, just every single aspect of it kind of is becoming a little bit bigger. And even though it's a mini golf game, we're thinking of these things as almost like little mini theme parks. And with Atlantis coming out here pretty soon, I think that's really going to show people how big and how cool these mini golf locations can be. We don't want to have to pull punches. It just seemed to make sense that we needed to do a little bit of a price increase just to help offset the cost of just making these things bigger and better. And especially if you look at something like Arizona Modern, I still love this course, but if you compare it to the new courses, if you look at like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, just how much went into that course and all of the little details that the larger team is able to add, the squid animation, the fact that you sort of arrive in this mini sub that docks with the sub and lets you out onto it. Those little details that have kind of become very iconic for Walkabout players. You don't want to have to skimp on any of those because that's kind of what's making the game, it feels like at this point. Maybe there are some bigger things that were out of reach that are starting to become more in reach. The challenging thing about courses and licensing is that it often takes quite a while to do anything like that. It's going to take you at least a few months to start chatting with people and figure out if there's something there and contracts and all that, even before you start doing the course. And then you've got at least another 12 months to actually build out the course. One of the things that we have learned is that it would be possible for us to do, if we had the whole team piled onto a single course, we could get each course done in maybe 4 months. But really, if you want that to be more efficient and we're aiming to get courses out more regularly, we've got to be working ahead, and we really do have to make it more, it's almost like make a TV series. We're shooting stuff almost back to back. We're doing models for one course, and then we just jump over to gameplay for the next, and then we've kind of got different teams in different sections, and it forms this nice long sort of pipeline. I feel like we're getting that dialed in, and it's making us more efficient, but also it means that the end result is a lot better. because we're able to figure out things like hole design early and lock them in, and figure out some of the extras that we're going to do and lock them in early and design around those, as opposed to just adding them kind of last minute, where sometimes they can easily feel a little tacked on. A lot of it is just sort of getting the whole team to this point where we can really be cranking out incredibly high quality content. I mentioned the skate park earlier. Especially the easy version of this is one of my other favorite holes that stumped a couple of people, because it's essentially a half pipe, but the solution is that you actually have to just tap it over the edge and then it'll shoot up and come over. Definitely more of a bit of a puzzle hole. The hard version still has this sort of fun slalom idea to it, but the skate park thing definitely made its way into 5 or 6 of the holes on this course. I haven't even been in here for probably a month and a half now, just because we've been so busy on the upcoming courses. I love chilling out on some of these courses. I think that the music that Chris Raymond did on this course in particular, totally kind of unexpected. It has this very sort of southwestern, but also modern, and just something about the music on this course is just, it's lovely and very chill. And yeah, it really feels like I could just hang out here for a long time. So here we are coming out to hole 18 that we saw from the very top a little while back. The hard mode, of course, added a couple of extra little obstacles, but this also became one of the very iconic holes. A lot of times the 18th hole is something that we do something bold with. And on the easy version, without that, it's very simple. It just doesn't have any walls, but it's this really, really long putt. Something that we like to do with the 18th hole is just take one element and really go all in on, maybe make it bigger, or maybe make it more complex, or maybe take that one idea just to the nth degree in a way that mini golf doesn't typically do. And there was just something about the shape of this promontory, this actual like constructed bridge that was in there, that was really, really fun to just sort of like, oh yeah, it has to be like the longest, straightest putt ever, but that you are going to fall off into the abyss like for the slightest problem. That's also one of the things that we always try to do in the hard mode, is just like, oh, just offset things, just get things into a position that it's a little bit harder to get to, because it could really sort of separate some of the best players. This is also the course that I think is still one of the most popular for a lot of tournament play, because the walls are so consistent that there's not a lot of randomness. It really is skill, and there are a lot of holes that you have to have great control over, not only your direction, but also just the weight of your putt. And on this hole especially, there's a couple of spots that you can get into that could actually get you all the way onto the green with your second putt. And I've even seen a couple of trick shots. There are people who have aced this hole before. It's pretty wild to see how they find a railing that happens to give them the perfect bounce. But yeah, a couple of the hole-in-ones videos are just fantastic.